How much money is left for the Braves this winter, and what positions might they add to? Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Monday, January 27th. This is your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. You can find all my written work, BravesToday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Best way to support us, obviously, tell your friends about the podcast, wherever they get their podcast for audio, or on YouTube. Tell them to go to BravesToday.com, free or paid subscription. That helps us out with covering all of our reporting trips and things like that. And we talked at the end of last week about Jurickson Profar signing with the Braves, right? We're all really excited. He's going to be the starting left fielder. We brought you on the YouTube channel. We actually brought you the video from Alex Anthopoulos talking on Thursday night. If you want to go watch that press conference, again, youtube.com/BravesToday. You can go watch it there. We played some clips for that for you on Friday. But I want to get into what else to expect. We got a little bit of news from Mark Bowman of MLB.com with a specific player name. And there's a little bit of confusion about how much money is available, where they might or might not add. So let's talk about that. And I think the first thing to discuss is how much money is left. Okay, there was a report on Thursday prior to the Profar signing that the Braves had about $33 million to spend this offseason. Now, the way that works, that's not total value of the contract, right? Because Profar would have taken all of that. That is $33 million in 2025 salary commitments. That amount would have been lower, but you saw how Atlanta restructured some stuff. Ronaldo Lopez, Aaron Bummer to get a couple $1 million. They traded Jorge Soler. They declined Travis d'Arnaud's option. That money could have been a lot less had the Braves not made all those moves. But if you do some of the math here, okay, $33 million is the amount that Mark Bowman reported on Thursday. And again, it's such a specific amount that I feel that this is correct. Like this is the amount that they legitimately have to spend, right? This is not something where he's making something up. This is a good quality source with the right amount. So Jurickson Profar, as we discussed, $12 million salary in 2025. He's making more in 26 and 27. He'll make $15 million in each of those years. So the CBT figure, which is based off of the average annual value, is $14 million a year for all 3 years. But the cash salary, $12 million, means that Atlanta has roughly $21 million of that 33 left. And depending on what's going to happen with the CBT impacts how much of that they'll use and how much of that they'll hold back. There's been a little bit of conversation about the CBT. David O'Brien of The Athletic did a Twitter thread, I think over the weekend or last week, talking about the CBT and talking about how he was convinced that the Braves were in fact trying to reset the CBT. And I want to do some clarification here because I've seen some questions and I've seen some people ask about this whole CBT thing. It's not a ton of money, okay? Like I think it's important to discuss that here. The Braves payroll last year, so for 2024, the Braves payroll, the cash payroll, finished at $231.9 million, according to Fangraphs. I believe that SpotTrack had them higher, but the tax payroll was higher because the tax payroll is based off of the AAVs and not the actual cash. So because guys are making more in the back half of their extensions and so many guys are still early in their extensions, the CBT payroll was a lot higher. And that's where the tax comes in. And the tax is you only pay the tax on the money over the CBT limit. First year, 20%. Second year, 30%. That's where Atlanta was last year, was a 30% on the first 20. Or I guess 30% on all of it. And then an additional escalator once you break 20 million over. It came out to like 14 million bucks last year. Like that was the tax bill for Atlanta, was like 14 million bucks. So if you're running a payroll, again, the 2024 payroll, according to Fangraphs, the cash payroll was 231 million. 14 million is not a ton of money. It's not really that much. And if you took that from 30% to 50%, it still wouldn't be too much for Atlanta to pay this year. The actual tax amount they're paying is not that bad. And so I think in some of the conversations we've been having about the CBT, people have been conflating the idea of they would like to reset it with they have to reset it. I trust AA when he said they're willing to go over it for the right move. I just, for all the reasons we've talked about so far this winter, whether it was the salaries, the Jeff Hoffman injury, all of that, I just don't think they've found the right move that would take them over the CBT. And there are benefits to resetting the CBT. Everybody thinks that it's just, hey, on the CBT, you would lower your penalties back to 20%. But a year under the CBT has other benefits as well when it comes to qualifying offers and all that kind of stuff. Kind of previewing real quick. Tomorrow's show is a little bit of a longer term projection out. If Atlanta were to reset the CBT in 2025, what could that let you do in 2026? And a little bit of a longer term factors in some of the prospects and how they perform. It's a whole big show that I've been working on this idea for a while, and I wanted to bring it to you guys. That's tomorrow. But in the meantime, what are they going to do here, right? Depending on where you check, Fangraphs has the Braves at 212 for the cash payroll. Cott's Contracts, part of Baseball Prospectus, has them at 216. The opening day payroll last year was $223 million. So even if you take, I usually use Fangraphs for everything. I feel like they're pretty consistent, and I know some of the people over there who do this stuff. So if you use that, they're $9 million below last year's payroll. The CBT figure, depending on which site you go to, is either 235 or 230 once you add in Profar. Again, Fangraphs has them at 230. Cott's Contracts has them at 235. I don't know exactly why those figures are different. They're just calculating something differently one site to the other. This stuff's proprietary. We don't actually get the exact information on these. We don't ever actually know. The CBT threshold is 241. So you've got $20 million that you can spend, right? If we're going off of Mark Bowman's $33 million figure, minus the Jurickson Profar $12 million salary for this year, then you've got a roughly $21 million left to spend. AA likes to keep money to the side for in-season additions. So trades, anywhere from May or June to the deadline, adding a guy, you take on the prorated portion of their salary. So if they have $5 million left in salary to be paid the rest of that season, when you acquire them, that's how much they cost you. If a guy's making $20 million a year, but you don't get him until August or July, you don't pay all $20 million. You just pay what's left. Makes sense. So if Atlanta's holding back, I don't know, $6 million bucks, maybe, that'll get you a lot of, most players that are on the block on their final year of control as a rental or whatever are usually, you're not going to pay them more than $6 million over the rest of the season. So that means Atlanta could have up to $15 million bucks left to spend at this point in time. But there's a lot of reasons why I think it's more likely to be a reliever than a starter. Let's look at both options, and I'll explain why next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy, new sponsor to the channel. We absolutely love these guys. really fun what they do. They have statistical projections for whatever sport that you're watching. Right now it's NFL. Obviously, we have a Super Bowl matchup. The Eagles just absolutely rolled earlier in the day over the Commanders. And so the way that this would work, let's say we're picking the Super Bowl, right? You would look at all of the different players who are playing and look at all of their statistical projections. You select certain players on certain stats for your lineup, and you choose higher or lower. Same thing for NBA, same thing for tennis, whatever sport it might be. I love doing this when we get to baseball season, because I like to think that I'm smart enough to know that, like, oh, hey, this hitter has a really good matchup against this starter tonight or whatever. So, but you go in there, you choose your projections, you choose higher or lower on their statistical projections, and you can win up to 1,000 times your money on your lineup. They're available just about everywhere across Braves country, not Mississippi, but Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida. They're in all of those places. And again, when you make your first deposit, the link's in the episode description, promo code is BRAVES, you get a free play and up to $1,000 in bonus cash with Underdog Fantasy. Try it today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about where the Atlanta Braves go from here, with the assumption that they have about $15 million left to spend this offseason, and then a little bit more in the season if something comes up and they have to add. If they want to stay under the CBT, it could be as low as $6 to $10 million to add to stay under the CBT. Again, tomorrow's show, we're going to talk more about the benefits of resetting the CBT and what that money might get used for in 2026 in the next free agency period. It's a really fun show. Stay tuned for that tomorrow. But we did get a little bit of news about the Atlanta Braves, and this also came from Mark Bowman, so really doing some good work with sourcing this year, that the Atlanta Braves are reportedly interested in reliever Ryne Stanek. Now, that was also the other team that was in that same tweet from Mark Bowman's sources were the Chicago Cubs. They did complete a trade for Ryan Pressly on Sunday. So you'd have to think they're less interested in Ryne Stanek than they were going into the weekend, right? Because they got this deal done with Pressly. And so let's talk about Ryne Stanek, former Astros. You saw him in the World Series, right? Moved on, was with Seattle and the Mets, was traded mid-year last year. Let's talk about who he is as a pitcher. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? And I think the thing you need to know about Ryne Stanek is there are, in essence, two versions of Ryne Stanek. From 2021 through 2023 with the Astros, he was statistically a very good reliever. Okay, 3 seasons, he went 8-7 with a 2.90 ERA, pitched in 186 regular season games, and then another 21 postseason games. And in the postseason, 3-0 with an ERA of 3. He had, in that 3-year stretch with the Astros, 173 2/3 innings, so less than 1 inning per outing, officially. 10.2 strikeouts per 9, 4.6 walks per 9, so that's not great. And just under 1 home run per 9 innings. Picked up 3 saves. He was mostly medium to high leverage, right? 41 holds across those 3 years for the Astros. I think he actually led the Astros in holds in 2021, his first year there after leaving Miami. In 2024 was a much rougher year for Ryne Stanek. 7-3, 4.88 ERA, pitched in 63 games, only 55 1/3 innings. He came in sometimes to get the final out in an inning, a fireman kind of role. 67 strikeouts, so 10.9 strikeouts per 9, up from his 21 through 23 usage with the Astros. Strikeout rate was up. Walk rate of 25 walks, so 4.1 per 9, down from the 4.6 with the Astros, and only an 8 home runs allowed, which is 1.3 per 9 innings, which is significantly up from his time with the Astros. And I honestly don't know what to think about Ryne Stanek. There's pros and cons here, and it's a really confusing profile that I'm glad Alex Anthopoulos is in charge of figuring out and not me, okay? So some of the pros here, like let's do the pros and cons back and forth on this. One of the pros a lot of people have pointed out for Ryne Stanek, fantastic fastball velocity. Averaged 97.7 last year, which was 96th percentile in all of baseball. He's got gas. And we've talked in the past about the Braves not having a ton of velocity in their pen. They were one of 4 teams to not have a single pitch thrown over 100 miles an hour last year in the majors. Not a single one. I can't think of the other 4. I'm trying to remember. I can't even remember who it was. I had this tweet like a couple weeks ago. But the flip side of that good fastball velocity is the fastball from a run value perspective, 0. It was the best pitch in his arsenal, but it was still a 0. And a lot of the pitch characteristics, the movement profiles of these pitches are kind of ordinary. And by that, what I mean, we've talked about this before, when you look at StatCast and they have the big circle with all the colored dots, the movement profile, something that they do is they have a shaded box for each pitch color. And that is where the average pitch of that type from that handedness of pitcher ends up, right? Sliders are in yellow. I think four-seam fastballs are in red. Sinkers are in orange. Things like that. For the most part, Ryne Stanek's movement profiles on his pitches end up being right there by those boxes, like inside of those league average circles, with the exception of his four-seam fastball. It gets a little bit more induced vertical break over average. And so that's why it's the best performing pitch. It has outlier traits. It has like almost 18 inches of induced vertical break, which is elite levels, right? The average is like 16 across baseball. But everything else, the splitter, the slider, that new sinker that he added, everything is it moves like you would expect the pitch to move, right? So a little bit of a con there because he's not doing very many things outside of the ordinary, right? The muscle memory for the hitters is there. And you see this a lot with relievers when they face the same guys multiple times in a series. Think about a postseason series. That's where you really see the relievers like this get hurt. Because, the velocity is great, but after you've seen them 2 or 3 times in a series, you know what to expect. These pitches move like the other sliders you've seen, move like the other splitters you've seen, and they're not as hard to hit as they should be. So, pro and con there. Another pro is, again, he's got back-end experience. I told you he led the Astros in holds in 21. He's got postseason experience. The flip side of that is Ryne Stanek, across the last 3 seasons in Houston, was getting less and less high leverage opportunities, right? Again, he led them in holds in 2021. In 2023, he was like 7th on the team in holds. They were using him less and less in those high leverage opportunities. They were preferring to use other guys in the 8th inning and even in the 7th inning. And so, yes, he has experience as a setup man. He has experience in the postseason. But he also has a trend of his performance getting worse year over year, including 2 straight years with an ERA over 4, and last year being almost over 5 at a 4.88. It's weird, though. The ERA wasn't good, but a lot of the inputs are good, right? His expected batting average of 205, 89th percentile. His expected ERA was almost a run and a half lower than his actual ERA. His expected ERA was 3.44 compared to an actual of 4.88. Some of that's bad luck, batting average of balls in play, stuff like that. Some of that's just variance that will fix itself. But that's a significant spread. Now, we've seen Alex Anthopoulos go after guys with a spread like that before. Aaron Bummer's a great example of a guy who had much better expected stats than actual stats with the White Sox in 23. So you can see why Atlanta would want to go after him. Chase rate, 32% chase rate, 85th percentile. Whiff rate, 33.2%. That's 94th percentile. He's virtually elite at some of those inputs. But again, the results were not good. We already talked about the ERA being almost 5. His barrel rate of 9.6%, 16th percentile in baseball. His hard hit rate of 41.8%, 24th percentile. Now, some of that is he's a fly ball pitcher. His ground ball rate was like 33, 34%, which is atrocious, right? The good guys are getting close to 50%. He's in the low 30s. So it makes sense if he's given up hard contact, which is the hard hit rate. Remember, anything 95 or harder is a hard hit ball. If he's given up a lot of hard hit balls, it makes sense he would have more barrels than a ground ball guy. But the point remains, he's given up a lot of hard hit contact despite such good inputs as far as chase and whiff and things like that. And I think some of that goes back to the movement characteristics of these pitches, right? Like, it's a good splitter, but if you are sitting splitter, you're going to crush it because it does what every other splitter does. It's not a bad slider. It's a high velo slider. I like those hard sliders, 88 miles an hour, but it moves like every other slider does. And so if you're sitting slider, you can crush it. He lives off of sequencing, really, and getting you to miss the fastball. And on top of all of this, his walk rate is like 10.4%, bottom 20th percentile in baseball. So there's another issue. So there's pros, there's cons. I don't know if Atlanta is going to come to a deal with Ryne Stanek or not, but I just think it's kind of relevant to point out he fits the profile of a guy that the Braves can fix, right? He absolutely does. You know, the guys who significantly underperform their expected stats, you give them a tweak or two to a pitch grip, a usage, whatever it is, and you fix him. He fits that profile. But at the same time, it's also kind of hard to look at 2 years with a combined ERA of 4.5 and a walk rate over 10% and say, yeah, that's the guy you want to add. So we'll see what Alex Anthopoulos does. In just a minute, a lot of people are asking for a starter, and I don't think the Braves are going to sign one, and I'll tell you why next, right here on Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby here talking about how much money the Braves have to spend this offseason, like how much is remaining before spring, and where does it go. Reminder, if you send this podcast to a friend, if they ask if the Braves are done or not, send this to them so they know how much is left. Tell them to go to bravestoday.com, sign up for the newsletter where we broke all this. I think I broke this down on Saturday on the newsletter. A lot of people are asking for a starter, and I don't necessarily think the Braves are going to be aggressive at signing a starter. And it goes back to something Alex Anthopoulos told us on Thursday night. I pulled the clip so you can hear. I mentioned it on that Friday show, but I actually pulled the clip today so you can hear exactly what he said in his own words about the high bar to clear to add a starter.
You know, if we do something in the rotation, I think it's going to be something that we think makes sense to, block guys like Holmes and Anderson. Granted, they have to make the team. They're out of options. But, we have to think that's, clear cut the way to go. And, they could then be in the bullpen.
In essence, if they want to sign a guy to be in the rotation, it has to be somebody that is no doubt better than Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson, which means to start the year, this guy has to be no worse than your number 4 starter. And that's assuming you think Grant Holmes is going to be a number 5. And I've seen a lot of the underlying metrics, and I think he can be legitimately an ERA of 3 and change guy. 3 to 3 and change. I think Grant Holmes can be that good for the Braves. Because despite what people think, you don't need to add a starter just to add a starter. Yes, you have workload concerns and injury concerns about Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez and all of these guys. Yes, you have questions. Every pitching staff, just about in baseball, has questions. You take one or two of these starters out of any rotation, they're a lot worse. But from a sheer number of starters perspective, the Braves have more starting pitching depth right now than they've had in a long time. Every year of the last 4 seasons, the Braves have used between 10 and 13 conventional starters. So I'm not counting openers. This is actual starting pitchers who have worked as starters. Right now, despite the fact you DFA'd Connor Gillespie to make room for Jurickson Profar, here's the list of guys you have right now to make starts for you on the 40-man roster in 2025. Chris Sale, Ronaldo Lopez, Spencer Schwellenbach, Grant Holmes, Ian Anderson, AJ Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, Davis Daniel, Hurston Waldrop, Dylan Dodd, and then eventually Spencer Strider. That's 11 names. Now, do we want Dylan Dodd making more than a couple starts? No. But you're not going to give 20 starts to each of those 13 guys. You didn't give 20 starts to each of those 13 guys the last few seasons when you used 13 different starters. You had a core 6 or 7, and then a bunch of guys who made spot starts. Am I a lot less concerned about what Dylan Dodd can do in 2 spot starts than I am in what he can do in 20? Yeah. Do I want him making 20 starts? No. Am I okay with him making 2? Sure. That doesn't count non-40-man prospects who could debut this year. Maybe a Drew Hackenberg, maybe a Lucas Braun, maybe, Ian Mayhap. Like there's plenty of names. So you don't need to add a starter just to add a starter. You have a lot of starters. To AA's point on the clip that I played you, if you're going to add a starter, it has to be a no doubt, this dude is one of our top 4 pitchers to start the year. And I don't know how many of those guys are left out there. They worked on Jeff Hoffman because the fallback on Jeff Hoffman was he can go in your bullpen. Okay, great. Supposedly, they worked on Justin Verlander. He ended up going to the Giants. Max Scherzer, maybe. He's probably going to be at least $15 million, if not more. Remember, if you're holding back $6 million or so for the deadline, then you have $15 million remaining. So that's all of your remaining upgrades is Max Scherzer. That would be it. Is $15 million enough to sign Scherzer? And do we think that he is no doubt a slam dunk postseason starter for you right now? At age 41, I don't know. I honestly don't. He threw it a pro day last week. I haven't heard much about it. I don't know if Scherzer's a no doubt postseason starter on this team. Is he better than Chris Sale? No. Is he better than Ronaldo Lopez? I don't think so. Is he better than Spencer Schwellenbach or Spencer Strider? I don't think so. Is it worth paying the rest of your budget to bring in a veteran Max Scherzer as a number 4 or 5? I don't think it is. What about some of the other options? Jack Flaherty. Does he take another short-term deal? He took a short-term deal last year. Took a 1-year deal, and he pitched well with Detroit. Got picked up by the Dodgers. Does he take another one? Because AA's not going to sign Jack Flaherty to a multi-year deal. There were injury concerns last year. He was going to get traded to the Yankees, and the Yankees backed out of the deal after the medicals. The Dodgers ended up picking him up because the Dodgers don't care if you get hurt. They've got 37 starters every year. They don't care if you get hurt. But I don't think Atlanta's going to want to give him a long-term deal because of that injury stuff. He's probably not going to want to sign another 1-year deal. He did that last year. What about Nick Pivetta? He has a qualifying offer. I don't mind the concept of Nick Pivetta. I don't want him as one of my postseason guys. 1, qualifying offer. Same thing knocked out Sonny Gray. But then 2, I don't think he's a slam dunk postseason starter. He's got home run problems that nobody's been able to figure out to this point in his career. His career best ERA in a season is 4.04. I'm banking that Grant Holmes can give you a 4.04 for a lot less than Nick Pivetta will sign for. So, for the reasons that AA has given and just the options that are left, I don't think Atlanta signs a starter. I think Atlanta's more interested in getting a reliever to add to their back end than they are at getting a starter. Now, As far as what relievers are left, there's not a ton, right? I do think that if he'll take a pay cut, maybe you reunite with Kenley Jansen. Give him a chance to play with Ozzie again and with fellow Curacao native Jurickson Profar. I don't think any team's ever had 3 players from Curacao on it at the same time other than their WBC team. So, maybe you do something like that. Maybe you get Stanek. Maybe you get Kenley Jansen. Maybe you go for a reliever, but for a lot of reasons, reliever makes a lot more sense to me than starter. Because yeah, you've grabbed guys for relief. You've grabbed guys to start. But you have more known quantities at starter than you have at reliever now that AJ Minter's in New York and Joe Jimenez is probably gone for the year. Let me know what you think. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. You can email us, contact@bravestoday.com. We have a couple emails came in from you guys after the Profar signing. We're going to do a mailbag probably on Wednesday. But until then, if you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode. And until next time, this has been Braves Today.